imagine you're running from the worst year of your life. Your marriage just ended. Your world fell apart. So you build a boat with your own hands and sail into the Atlantic Ocean, looking for peace. Instead, 800 miles from land, your boat sinks in the middle of the night. For the next 76 days, you're alone on a 6-foot raft with almost no food, no water, and no rescue coming. This actually happened. This is Steven Callahan's story. In 1981, his marriage ended. Not the kind of ending where you close a chapter and move on, the kind that burns the whole book. He was lost, hurt, looking for some way to get out from under the wreckage of his own life. So he made a choice. He would build a sailboat with his own hands. Then he would leave everything behind. Every painful reminder, every unfinished conversation, every room that felt too quiet. He would sail into the Atlantic Ocean and look for something that life on land was no longer giving him. Peace, solitude, a chance to reset. He spent months shaping that boat. A 21-foot sloop he named Napoleon Solo. Every plank, every fitting, every line was something he had cut, shaped, or installed himself. It was not just a boat. It was a project to pour his pain into. It was therapy. It was his way out. And Steven was not new to this world. He was a naval architect, a guy who literally designed boats for a living. He had already crossed the Atlantic once with a friend. This time, he wanted to do it alone. No partner, no distractions, no one to answer to. In the fall of 1981, he set off from Cornwall, England, to join the Mini Transat 6.50, a brutal solo race across the Atlantic to Antigua in the Caribbean. The ocean had other plans. Huge storms ripped through the fleet. Some boats went down, others limped into port, torn apart. Napoleon Solo took a beating. Steven pulled out of the race in Spain and spent weeks patching the damage. Most people in his position would have called it a sign and gone home. He didn't. He pushed south along the coasts of Spain and Portugal, then out to Madeira and finally to the Canary Islands. On January 29, 1982, he left El Hierro in the Canaries, pointed his bow west, and aimed straight for Antigua. For 6 days, it was everything he had hoped for. Blue water, good wind, the boat moving easily through the waves. Steven finally had the simple, quiet life he had imagined. Just himself, the wind, and the horizon. On day 7, that vanished in an instant. It was the middle of the night, February 4th, 1982. Steven was asleep in the cabin when it happened. A violent, crushing bang. The boat shuddered under him as if something enormous had slammed into its side. Something had. He never saw what hit him. Probably a whale, maybe some other large creature. Whatever it was, it tore into the hull below the waterline. Water was pouring in. Napoleon Solo was sinking. Picture this. You wake up in the dark. The floor is tilting. Water is rushing in. And you're 800 miles from land. A lot of people would freeze or lose control in that moment. Steven didn't. His mind went sharp. He knew those next few minutes would decide everything. He grabbed his 6-person Avon life raft, inflated it, and secured it to the boat. Then he did something most of us hope we would do, but are not sure we actually could. He went back into the sinking boat, again and again. He dove into the flooding cabin, feeling his way through cold, rising water, grabbing anything he thought might help him stay alive. A sleeping bag, a cushion, his emergency survival kit with some food, navigation charts, flares, a flashlight, and a few solar stills designed to turn seawater into drinking water. A spear gun he had bought on a whim just days before, and a book, Sea Survival by Dougal Robertson, written by a sailor who had once been adrift himself. He had no idea how much those items would matter. Just before dawn, a large wave hit. The line connecting the raft to Napoleon Solo snapped. Steven watched the boat he had designed and built, the boat that carried his hopes and his escape plan, slide under the waves and disappear. Gone. Now he was alone, completely alone, in a 6-foot raft in the middle of the Atlantic, roughly 800 miles from the nearest land. No radio, no Mayday sent. Nobody knew he was in trouble. Nobody was coming. The man who had sailed out to escape his problems was about to face a fight for survival unlike anything he could have imagined. The life raft was rated for 6 adults, but only for a short-term emergency. In reality, it was cramped and fragile. Under the low canopy, Steven could not sit upright comfortably. For the next 2.5 months, this little rubber shelter would be his entire world. That is the kind of situation that breaks people before hunger or thirst ever does.
But before the real physical suffering began, Steven made a decision that probably saved his life. He later wrote, "I tried to adopt the attitude that this wasn't the end of the voyage, but that it continued on a humbler craft." In other words, the trip was still happening. The boat had simply changed. That mindset was huge. He took stock of his gear. From the Raft's kit, he had a small supply of water, a few emergency rations, a pair of paddles, flares, sponges, a radar reflector, 2 solar stills, a first aid kit, a flashlight, signal mirrors, a patch kit for the raft, some fishing line, and 1 hook, plus the spear gun, the sleeping bag, the cushion, the book, and a few other things he had managed to rip out of the sinking boat. He did the math as calmly as he could. If he rationed his food and water almost perfectly, and if the currents pushed him where he needed to go, he might drift into the main shipping lanes in around 2 weeks. If a ship saw him, he was saved. There was a catch. The raft had no engine, no sail, no rudder. He could not steer. He was a passenger moving wherever the winds and currents decided to take him. Then came his first major technical problem. The solar stills, his main backup plan for water, did not work. They were old World War II surplus units and came with no instructions. In theory, they could turn seawater into about a pint of drinkable water each day. In practice, they were useless. Steven was an engineer, so he did what engineers do. He took one apart, piece by piece. He sacrificed one of the 3 just to figure out how it worked. That sacrifice paid off. He managed to repair and operate the remaining 2. On a good day, together they could give him roughly 1 pint of fresh water. 1 pint under a brutal tropical sun. Barely enough to keep a human being alive, but it was far better than nothing. By day 10, his food was nearly gone. The tiny rations were stretched as far as they could go, but it was not enough. He was getting weaker. He needed protein. He needed fat. He needed to start catching his own food. And then the ocean itself started to change around him. Life began to grow on the raft. Barnacles formed on the bottom. Those barnacles attracted small fish. The small fish attracted bigger fish. Within days, a little ecosystem formed, centered on his tiny raft. The first fish he caught were triggerfish, tough, armored, and bitter. On day 13, he finally managed to spear one with the gun he had almost left behind. It tasted awful. He cried while he ate it. He cried not because it was delicious, but because it was food. It was survival. Then something unexpected and beautiful happened. A school of Dorado, or mahi-mahi, moved in around the raft. About 50 of them. Brilliant blue and gold, fast and powerful, 3 to 6 feet long. They did not just pass by, they stayed. They circled under the raft at night, left to hunt during the day, then returned, following the raft like it was a drifting island. Steven slowly learned how to spear them. They became his main source of food. He later wrote, "They came closer and closer until I could spear them. I was their island. At night, they'd surround the raft, just cruise along with me, stay there all night long." If you picture the open ocean, it is easy to imagine it as empty. For him, these fish were a moving, living halo under his feet. He would watch them launch themselves out of the water, 3 feet, 4 feet in the air, blue and gold bodies flashing in the sun. In the middle of all that suffering, those moments were beautiful. They kept him alive, and in a strange way, they also kept him sane. To hold himself together, Steven built a strict daily routine. Every single day, he checked the raft for leaks and pumped it up, ran the solar stills and saved every drop of water, collected rainwater whenever he could, tried to estimate his position with charts and dead reckoning, fished for food, did stretches and simple exercises in that cramped space, kept a detailed log, and patched and reinforced weak spots in the raft. If you have ever gone through a hard time, you know how powerful routine can be. For him, it was the thin line between, "I am surviving," and "I am just waiting to die." Around day 20, he drifted into the major Atlantic shipping lanes, the highways of the sea. Huge cargo ships and tankers passed through these routes constantly. This was his shot. He had only a handful of flares. He could not waste them, so he watched the horizon for hours at a time, squinting into the light, waiting. Then he saw the first ship, then another. Over the next several days, he spotted 9 ships total, 9 chances at rescue. Some passed within a mile, close enough that he could make out their shapes, see movement on the decks. He fired flares. Bright orange smoke shooting into the sky. He waved, screamed, did everything he could think of. Not one ship saw him. Think about that for a second. 9 ships. 9 times he thought, this is it, I'm saved. And 9 times they just sailed past. From the bridge of a cargo ship, the ocean is vast and flat. A 6-foot orange raft is less than a speck. The same bright orange that seemed so obvious to him was almost invisible from miles away. For Steven, this was brutal. His quiet assumption had been simple. Make it to the shipping lanes, get seen, go home. Now he knew that rescue was not guaranteed. In fact, it was unlikely. In his log, he wrote, "That's the way it is." Then he adjusted his expectations. If no ship was going to save him here, then there was only one option left. He had to stay alive long enough to drift all the way to the Caribbean. Instead of 2 weeks adrift, he was now looking at 2 months or more. The real fight was just getting started. Day 43. 6 weeks on a raft the size of a small tent. By this point, Steven had lost around a third of his body weight. His skin was covered in raw, painful salt sores. His muscles ached. He was constantly hungry, constantly thirsty, and constantly tired. Then his situation suddenly got worse. He speared a big Dorado, and it fought like hell. As it thrashed near the raft, the spear tip punched straight into the raft's lower tube, the part that kept the floor above the water. The result was a 4-inch gash. Air hissed out. The tube sagged. Within minutes, he was sitting in water. The floor dropped. The raft lost its shape. He could not get dry. The salt water soaked everything and turned every sore on his body into a burning wound. For the next 7 days, he fought just to keep the raft inflated. He pumped and pumped, hundreds of extra strokes every day. His arms throbbed. His hands cramped and shook. Sleep became even harder. With the raft half deflated, everything else got harder too. The loose, folding floor made it tougher to fish. The solar stills, now sitting lower, worked less efficacy. With the raft half deflated, everything else got harder too. The loose, folding floor made it tougher to fish. The solar stills, now sitting lower, worked less efficiently. That meant less food and less water at exactly the wrong time. He was slipping toward collapse. Later, he admitted, "I really did lie down and think about giving up for a while." This was his absolute low point. After surviving storms, near misses with ships, constant hunger and thirst, now his last barrier between himself and the ocean was literally falling apart. Then he made another decision. I decided no. He refused to stop trying. He emptied out his supplies again, looking for anything that might help. He experimented with patches, glue, pieces of material, trying repairs that were not in any manual. After 7 long days of trial, error, and sheer stubbornness, he managed to patch the hole well enough for the tube to hold air. The raft was still fragile, still uncomfortable, but it was afloat. He would later call that repair the biggest victory of my life. The days kept passing. The horizon almost never changed. By day 74, the solar stills finally failed completely. After weeks of service, they just stopped producing. These had been his main source of drinking water. He was down to 3 cans of fresh water, about 3 days if he was very careful. After everything he had fought through, it was now possible that dehydration would finish what storms, sharks, hunger, and despair could not. Then, on the evening of day 75, he saw something new, light. not the lights of a distant ship moving across the horizon. These stayed fixed in one place: land. It was the island of Galante, just southeast of Guadalupe in the Caribbean. After 76 days adrift and around 1,800 nautical miles traveled, roughly the distance from New York to Los Angeles, he had finally reached the Caribbean. The next morning, local fishermen went out on the water near Galante. They usually avoided that side of the island. The conditions there were rough and unpredictable, but that day they noticed something: birds. A lot of birds circling and diving in one spot. Birds like that usually mean fish, so they headed over to check it out. Under the birds, they saw a small orange raft. Inside it was a man who looked like a skeleton. Long beard, skin covered in sores, barely conscious. They pulled him aboard their boat. After 76 days alone in the Atlantic, Steven Callahan was finally rescued. When they brought him ashore, Steven had lost about 44 pounds, roughly a third of his body weight. His body had been hammered by malnutrition, dehydration, and constant exposure to salt water. It took around 6 weeks before he could walk properly again. But he was alive, and he had something else too: a detailed written record. He had kept a log for almost the entire ordeal, tracking his decisions, his repairs, his failures, and his small victories. In 1986, he turned that log into a book, Adrift, 76 Days Lost at Sea. It became a New York Times bestseller and stayed on the list for more than 36 weeks. It has been translated into many languages and is still considered one of the greatest survival stories ever written. His experience has been retold in documentaries and television specials. In 2024, a feature documentary called 76 Days Adrift was released, with filmmaker Ang Lee involved as an executive producer. What might surprise you most is what happened between Steven and the sea after that. He did not walk away from it. He went back. He completed dozens more offshore passages. He worked with filmmakers as a consultant, including advising Ang Lee on Life of Pi to help portray raft survival accurately. He also turned his suffering into better equipment. Using what he learned out there, he designed and patented new safety gear, including an improved life raft that can actually be sailed and steered instead of just drifting helplessly. Looking back on his time in that tiny raft, he once said, "I saw heaven from a seat in hell." In the middle of starvation, pain, fear, and exhaustion, he still found beauty: the stars at night, the glow on the waves, the Dorado leaping around his raft, the simple, stubborn fact that he was still alive. If you break his story down, a few things stand out about why he survived. First, he used the first few minutes after the collision incredibly well. He stayed calm, grabbed what he needed, and did not waste time on panic. Second, he protected his mind. Routine, logs, and a refusal to surrender mentally kept him from slipping into total hopelessness. Third, he was relentlessly resourceful. When gear failed, he fixed it. When something did not work, he studied it until he could make it work. He treated every problem as something to solve, not a final verdict. And finally, even when his belief wavered, he never fully let go of the idea that he might make it. 76 days, alone, in a 6-foot raft, no working radio, almost no food or water, his body breaking down, his raft literally shredding beneath him. Most people would not last a week in those conditions. He lasted more than 10. The man who sailed off to get away from his problems ended up learning something very different out there. In all that emptiness, you do not find peace by running away from hardship. You find it by facing it, inch by inch, and refusing to give up. And because he refused, we get to hear his story.